So what is the difference between a polyclonal versus a monoclonal approach? Is one of these more promising than the other?
Yeah, so polyclonal antibodies is just a mixture of antibodies that have more than one antibody in the mixture. So the plasma would be quite a few different kinds of antibodies, because you're taking it from different patients and mixing them all together. So that's a broad polyclonal idea, where a monoclonal will just be one antibody, and then you can have two monoclonals together, which is what Regeneron's doing. And I don't know if I really call that a polyclonal approach or two monoclonal. I would call it two monoclonal approaches, just because it's a little more clear what they're doing. Polyclonal usually implies that you're just taking all the antibodies from an animal or a human, and so I would call this a two monoclonal approach. And I think two is probably going to be better than one in general, because if they're binding on different parts of the different parts of the virus, you could see that might help. And then also if there was a mutation in the virus, it would have harder time escaping two antibodies compared to just one.
Great. So at the end of September, Regeneron released the first data from its descriptive analysis included. And this was looking at the first 275 patients who were enrolled in the trial. So I'm just going to kind of go over some highlights, and then I have a question for you at the end. So this is specific to the trial of non-hospitalized COVID-19 patients. And here's what the company said. The treatment reduced viral load and the time to alleviate symptoms in non-hospitalized patients with COVID-19. The antibody treatment also showed positive trends in reducing medical visits. Regeneron's president, Dr. George Yancopoulos, said the greatest treatment benefit was in patients who had not mounted their own effective immune response, suggesting that the treatment could provide a therapeutic substitute for the naturally occurring immune response. These patients were less likely to clear the virus on their own and were at greater risk for prolonged symptoms. He then said, these data also support the promise of vaccines targeting the coronavirus spike protein. Could you elaborate on this connection that he's talking about? What can we learn from antibody treatment trials that informs what we know about a coronavirus vaccine?
Yeah, so the spike is one of the proteins on the outside coat of the virus, and it uses that spike to attach to the cell and inject its genetic material into the cell. And so most of, maybe all, but certainly most of the vaccines are developing vaccines for that spike protein. So they put that protein in either by putting the protein directly in, or by inserting DNA or RNA that the cells then make that protein. But either way, you end up with spike protein in the body, and the participant, the patient that got the vaccine develops antibodies to that protein. And so if Regeneron's putting in antibodies that can then bind to that protein, and it seems to be helping patients, in theory, if the patients are making their own antibodies because they got the vaccine with the spike protein, then that should mean that those vaccines are likely to work.